you might be throwing millions at channels that aren't actually working. And today's guest built the econometric frameworks that expose what's really driving revenue for scaling brands and why your dashboard is probably lying to you. Kent's built attribution models for billion-dollar brands, taught this stuff at Columbia, currently at NYU, and has been deposed as an expert witness in economic litigation. He's
Oh,
seen what
haven't been
happens.
deposed yet. Haven't been
You haven't been
deposed
deposed
quite
yet?
yet. Well,
Okay.
no, we'll get there soon. Most of my reporting gets to the negotiation and settlement phase, but I'll get on the stand one day.
Okay.
Something
Okay.
to
All
look forward
right.
to.
So he's yeah. So you've been. So tell me about that a little bit. Like on the litigation side, are you preparing um, documents to help people get through the process, and how does that work?
Yeah, sure thing. So, myself and my company, we handle two different phases of litigation. Number one, through document and database management. So,
Mhm.
ever since the dot-com bubble, there is just a staggering amount of data with legacy law firm procedures that just do not, still to this day, do not always hold up database management and governance the right way. So the lawyering teams do not always have everything well organized for analysis, for strategy, and broader client prep. So we can come in at the earliest stages to manage those documents and discovery processes.
Got it.
And that's one thing we do. On the flip side of it, we can also do the economic and statistical analysis, also known as expert reporting, or even sometimes just more broadly as consultant strategy reporting. And
Hmm.
that's where we're actually working with the attorneys or preparing them for trial in these more heavy hitting analytic instances. So we can come in at the foreground or the background.
Got it. Okay, so Kent has seen what happens when your data story falls apart under real scrutiny, and it's probably pretty expensive, I bet.
Yeah, the costs of getting it wrong are much higher than just trying to do it right the first time. I totally understand. It's just unbelievably understandable how intimidating it is to delay the start. And it's not so much as delaying the start as just kind of hunkering down and doing what you would do in like that SAT or GRE thing, prep.
Hmm.
You have
Hmm.
30 minutes to write an essay, but man, does it help to spend the first 2 to 3 minutes outlining what you're going to say before you just start writing. Because the editing is just way more time consuming and exhaustive than just working with the right experts who can get you into a scalable regime. That's really where it should be.
Very cool. I like the analogy. So we're talking today a lot about forecasting, marketing attribution for ecom brands, specifically because we're going into Black Friday, but also because there's been a lot of economic uncertainty, both now, past couple of years, and who knows what's happening next year. Why are you qualified to talk to us about that?
Sure thing. So, despite getting into the marketing world in just kind of the most odd of happenstances, I was looking for a change of pace in my career, but we are now several years away from that pivot. I've since worked as anything from a director to the head of an analytic and data engineering department for one of the big global six marketing brands. And I've worked at a few of them, including a large brand that's more American centric, but I've worked for a few of the biggest. And I've seen how the teams are trained. I've seen how they adapt legacy systems, how they continue to leverage legacy systems, and how they sometimes have to build everything from the ground up. And that's often where someone like me comes in. I often was headhunted from one company to the next to undo that legacy framework, peel off the band-aid, and really just kind of dress the wound in a new way. And then, kind of get us back to fighting fit. So I've been doing that for the largest brands with some of the biggest companies, and seeing some of those bureaucratic shortfalls is where I decided to fit in my niche as an entrepreneur, to be a bit more agile without compromising the rigor. And that's at least what I'm proud of.
Cool. That's fantastic. So can't let's start with the first question, which is, how do I know if my marketing attribution is lying to me about what's actually driving sales?
Sure thing. So, the number one case where a company would be ready for, or even in the market, I should say, for for an analytic consulting firm like mine
Hmm.
is when they're leveraging the platforms that they are buying from, such as Meta and Google Analytics, Google Ads has its own kind of a dashboard that can or choose not to plug into Google Analytics.
Hmm.
Amazon has its own dashboard. So all of these services that you buy ads from have their own dashboards and analytic services, but they all just have that very understandable habit, wink, wink, of over attributing their own success.
Yeah.
And then what ends up happening is you look at all of the different platforms, assuming it, as a brand, and this can be brands from 5 million in revenue to over 150 million in revenue. You can see the same thing happen where you're looking at each of the different platforms. They each say, hey, you're doing great. Here's your return on ad spend. Here's your cost per acquisition, your lifetime value of a customer. But then when my now clients start, before they come to us, they start to add up all those attributions. It equals more than they sold.
Uh,
And so at some point, I remember the smartest thing that one of my clients did before they tapped us. They still tapped us, but before they did, they had someone in house just kind of configure the variance factor of, well, here's how much we actually sold, and here's how much all the attributions add up to. So they just said they got really good at forecasting what they are likely to sell.
yep.
But the reason why they came to us is because they couldn't inherently trust each individual component. They trusted the aggregate and they trusted the skim that they would swipe off the top.
Yep.
But actually knowing, am I putting too much into Instagram and it should it be going to, Amazon or vice versa? They couldn't juggle that. And it's because there's a natural self-service to over attribute at the platform level. So trying to get it right independent of all that is a very exhausting statistical procedure. Doing it in-house can get very costly. So actually, it ends up becoming more cost effective to hire a scrappy analytic team who
Yep.
just does this day in and day out. So that's, once again, that's kind of where we come in, but that was also a very understandable place for a lot of companies who are just trying to grow, but they're ready to, they're like, hey, we've been growing. We've gotten to a point where we're like upper mid range, but we want to get to big business. But to get to big business, you can't just keep pouring. You got to be, everything you shave off has to be strategically rerouted. And that's where they struggle.
And so why, obviously there are some attribution tools in the market, Triple Whale, Northbeam, Hyro,
Mhm.
some of those ones. Why use you and not one of those softwares?
Great question. It's not about not using them. Different
Hmm.
companies are at different stages can get a lot more value from some of those platforms and many of their competitors than they can from me. When you
Okay.
come to me for a highly bespoke tool, it's often because you want something you intrinsically own, so nothing exists on our side. We build it on the client side, so you don't ever have to worry about something breaking or something
Hmm.
going awry or
Hmm.
having a lack of transparency in the
Hmm.
inherent machine learning of it, like what are the cogs of the analytics going on. So some clients, even if they don't have that many marketing channels, just a handful, but the money is deep, they may want bespoke because they want the transparency, and
I
and
see.
that's often something boards might want. That's number one. Number two is they might want something bespoke because they are in so many marketing channels that it goes beyond the what is called the parameterization of some of these other tools. And for many of these tools to be as efficient as possible, they have to make a lot of heavy hitting data assumptions about each marketing channel. The more
Hmm.
channels you pile in, the more you're stress testing those tools. And that's when analytics, I'm not going to call it any tool by name, that's not fair. And these companies are innovating all the time to,
Yeah.
once again, to be fair. But we do see that when you start to get over 10 different marketing channels, you start kind of getting back to that idea that you're over attributing more than I even did. And so once again, if your business gets more complex, bespoke might be the way to go.
And are you building an application or is it you're sort of returning reports at some regularity?
Depends on the client.
Okay.
Absolutely. Sometimes we're building what we call the attribution dashboard. So it's absolutely a view, an executive view, and then sometimes there's kind of like the manager view, which is far more detailed and exhaustive with a lot more tabs. That really goes into the nitty gritty of all those different touch points. Um, and sometimes and that just exists on the client's own GCP, Amazon Web Services, or Microsoft Azure type environment, and they own it. We help just manage it accordingly. And then sometimes we have clients that just, they just want to pay for something far more scripted. They'd rather just have that email drop once every month or once every quarter of the report. And then if they also want us to walk them through it, we'll get on a call with them and walk them through it. So different strokes for different folks. There's not one right answer, I would say.
Okay. So let's get into the attribution modeling. How would we know that we're getting it wrong? So I think most of us would probably agree that if you look at the Facebook and the Google dashboards, that they're probably lying to us. But going beyond that, and you can go a bit technical here, how do we know if one of those softwares is struggling to do this correctly, or how do we know that we're missing something?
We typically know when we're missing something when it disagrees with the bottom line. That's the problem. The biggest problem with the tools that try to do everything all at once without, with saying like, hey, without having to wait for too long, and it's, it may not be super custom, but at least the plugins are safe. There's something to be said about that. And hey, move fast, break things, agility, that's great. And that's how a lot of startups should get started. We
Yep.
work with some startups or small businesses in that small getting to mid phase, but
Hmm.
that's not the people seeking us out. Those are just sometimes like even passion client projects that we like to work with. Like, hey, you're building something really cool. We want to be a part of that. But that's not really those who seek us out. So typically I say, when the bottom line, like you're actually, it could be EBITDA, depending if you're like, typically the biggest clients will look at EBITDA, but then more often than not, profit margin, rolling revenue, lifetime value, especially for our e-commerce clients. Um, when there is a disagreement between the per unit metrics that you're seeing, such as the cost per acquisition, the cost per click, cost per impression. When you're seeing the cost pers from the marketing spend side and what they estimate each client could be, or where they estimate the value of an order, average value of an order comes from. If that's just disagreeing with your gap, like with your actual accounting or finance department,
Okay.
that's often where we see people picking up our calls or responding to our emails. It's those who are ready, like, I know I can't turn off this marketing. It's doing something right, but I know, having been in the industry for X number of years, that we're wasting money because something is not aligning with what I know is coming through the door and what's
Hmm.
being tallied up by my
Hmm.
accounting team and what's coming out of the marketing department, because they're doing their best, but they're not speaking the same math. And yeah, so the way it breaks is just by classic business intelligence. I'm talking about a human being who just knows their business and something feels off. It's really a feeling when people pick up our call.
So, two things that stuck out to me. One is obviously, as a CFO, you're saying the accounting has to be correct. So yeah, love that. And the other you're saying is we still need to listen to our gut. So with all, I mean, you have 600 people in your company, you're working on analytics, and you have your own blog that you maintain about econometrics and all these things, and you're still saying with all that we have to trust our gut. I love it. How why I mean, I guess I wouldn't think an economist would say that. How have you gotten here to that point?
Well, no, no, I get that a lot, especially
Yeah,
because I'm an AI power user, just like so many other people. I have
right.
certain models and different companies I use for different tasks myself. Um, uh, where kind of where I get the galls to then say something like trusting your gut. I guess, I'm maybe being oversimplistic, but the sentiment comes from, you know, at the end of the day, we're doing heavy hitting analytic stuff. Not just us, but just our clients are always working with numbers. They're looking at numbers. Numbers are guiding our lives, whether we know it or not. And most people that that you and I would talk to are actively look at the numbers, no matter where they're getting it from. It's just that nobody is just letting their marketing mix model or their generative AI agent, there, it doesn't matter if it's the simplest analytic thing in the world or the most complex. Nobody actually is just saying, I'm going to have a boardroom of 12 of you agents and that's just going to run my company. You now see, like in the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post, I can't remember, it started with W, one of them at least, where they're saying like boards are coming out saying we should have an AI agent on the board, not be the board. Ultimately, these agents and these MMMs, they're algorithms. They can't, since they can themselves not be held accountable.
Right.
We human beings are the ones who are held accountable with every
Right.
decision that gets made. And so intrinsically, and then that's number one, but then number two, very briefly, is just that, a lot of what builds out these models is gut.
Okay.
Someone analytically was putting together a set of assumptions that,
Mm.
when mixed the right way, comes out with a slightly better predictive generative AI or a
Mhm.
slightly better predictive forecasting model than another person at that point in time. But it comes from a human innovation and a human accountability. So at the end of the day, hopefully you have the right person in the driver's seat, but
I
there's
see.
nothing wrong with a gut check if it's data informed.
Got it. So it's still important to have very good people, even with all the AI, even with all the analytics. It's still important to have someone who knows what they're doing. I love
Yeah.
that. Um, so one question that's related to this, the attribution and the marketing, and how do you know if it's working, is how do you know if I'm spending too much or too little on brand versus performance marketing? Um,
Hmm.
and and this one, your work in sort of ROI and investment is one of the reasons I was really excited to talk to you. And most people do not know the answer. Some people use like heuristics, rules of thumb.
Hmm.
One of mine is 5% should be spent on brand, 30% can be spent on marketing. But
Hmm.
but tell me from your point of view, what have you figured out? What have you seen?
What I figured out is that you can have a rule of thumb for your company, maybe even a smaller industry with a smaller set of like really, industry driving partners. Like
Hmm.
if you're C4, like for those of you who don't know the term, like the concentration of the top four companies in your industry. If your industry is highly oligopolistic, and I don't mean like literally just only four companies, but if four companies, for example, really do seem to own like 50% or more of your industry,
Yeah,
then that could have a rule of thumb. If you have a highly competitive industry, maybe you just need a rule of thumb for your own book of business. But the answer is almost never the same from company to company.
okay,
It really needs to be about that introspection with your data and your own client base. I mean, you could be selling, be selling shirts, but the two different TikTokers could be selling shirts on their TikTok shop, but the way that they communicate with their audience, even if the shirts are otherwise identical, is going to have different rates of churn or different rates of sale.
sure.
May even change the point of sale. Maybe some people are actually buying from the TikTok shop, but the nature of the content from a different TikTok influencer actually gets them to go to their website to buy from that
Mm,
differently. So at the end of the day, I tell people it's like, it's important to have a sense of what your industry is doing, and if you don't know what else to do, start with what you're observing, start with the reports that you're purchasing or the conversations you're having at trade shows and conferences.
hmm.
Start from a point of industry reflection, but then that serves as your initial condition. You should be then testing and learning based upon what you're seeing coming through the door. The comparison should not be there to kind of be like, like this proverbial Adam Smith invisible hand that you're scared of. No, you start with a really reasonable hypothesis and then iterate based upon what you're seeing. It's not against it's not bad to say, let me try putting a little bit more into brand this month or this quarter, or let me try putting a little bit more into performance marketing, or also known as lower funnel marketing,
Yep.
and seeing how it goes. That's number one. Number two is that it always is a mix, and sorry. On the one hand, it's personable. Your mix can be personable, But what is not up for discussion, frankly, is that you just don't get to have a mix. Um,
Mm,
when you start to look too deeply into one channel that you think is driving all the business, well, guess what? When you look under the hood very rigorously, what
hmm
we saw is that channel was stealing attribution from however you're attributing at that time, but it's not actually driving the business. The mix is driving the business, even if you can't perceive it. That's where we come in
mm,
to help companies understand what's causing what in what frequency and what cadence. But what is negotiable is how you mix and how you iterate. What's not negotiable is having a mix, because it doesn't matter if you're a company that's just making your first million, or a company, one of my biggest clients actually during the early parts of the pandemic. All I'll say is it's major major banking hub. I'll just say that they had people at the highest levels looking at the numbers, and then they were like, you know what? I think we just got to go all in on Google search. I don't see why we need any display marketing whatsoever. But that's because nobody clicked in their industry. Sorry, their clientele didn't click on those display ads. But they were so dearly influenced by them that when we were forced to turn off the display ads,
Make
there
movement.
went the business for that
Yeah.
month, and we had to turn them right back on. To
Yep.
just because people don't click, that doesn't mean influence isn't there. So that's what I'll say. What's non-negotiable is not having a mix. So those are my two kind of rules that I put out there.
And so what I'm hearing is uh, there's always a mix. Your mix is individual, and when you want to further optimize or scale, the process is not to do a bunch of research and then come up with a plan. It's more or less to iterate. Is that correct?
You can have a man.
Okay.
No, that's a great point. If what I said came off in that way, I just want to make a quick clarification, because
Oh,
to be
please.
fair. So, yeah, no, it's not that you don't have a plan, because I mean,
Oh, sorry.
I'm very regularly part of the next budgeting cycle for like the next fiscal year kind of a thing, and that's a plan, and that's based on a large quantum of
Mhm.
learning and talent that goes into the budgeting that needs to be that's learned in many ways, and it's educated in many ways to iterate for the next year. So no, you can
Okay.
absolutely plan, but I would argue, or at least this is how my brain works, I still just see that as a larger iteration of the
Yes.
learning. We're
Okay.
not overhauling, we're not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. I need a
That makes
better
sense.
idiom there, but
Sorry,
that's
that's more what I meant. You're
okay.
not going to
Fair enough.
tear everything
Just
down
for
and do
everyone else
something
out there
specific.
who might be new to the discourse,
Fair.
that's at least the clarification I would just put out there.
Fair. Sorry. And
Yeah.
so when you iterate, let's say you come up with a norm and you're I don't know, you're doing something with your mix. What is the first step in iteration to try to either optimize or let's talk more about scale. The
Mhm.
first step to scale your marketing in a way that provides better efficiency.
Mhm.
So I guess that's optimization and
Yeah.
scale. But what's the first step people should take?
Actually, I just want to just kind of point optimization and scale over time just become more and more the same thing.
Okay.
Perhaps at one point in business history, they could be separate departments or separate ways of working. I don't think that's been the case since the great financial crisis. I even think that's probably how we got into a crisis in the first place.
Interesting.
No, but yeah, so no, I definitely think the way you optimize, so the way you scale has to be grounded in optimization.
Okay.
Putting my economics hat on, you always have this idea in the economic models of savings equals investment. Well, yeah, no, on paper that makes sense. And economies that continue to grow are the ones that find or have the avenues to translate that savings into investment. And what makes the American market, for example, very strong, and many other markets around the world very strong, is there is kind of a healthy playing ground to translate that savings into investment. But
hmm
companies need to also think about doing the same thing, and that's actually something that is when uncertainty goes up, it is natural to want to find points of saving. You want to, but then that, if it's not optimized, if that savings, if the cost cutting you do one place does not find a way to try to be a growth engine somewhere else,
Hmm.
you are actually going to be hurting your bottom line and then giving market share away to the person who did creatively find a way to translate the cost savings into new revenue streams. So, and then that is scale. So I think good optimization should have an eye for scale, future forward thinking. Now you were asking like how's the best way to do that? Well, start with that hypothesis. And this is where like kind of the classic statistical thinking that I was born and brought up in, I'm not letting go of it. This idea that,
Hmm.
even though we have fancy machine learning models that we didn't have 5 years, let alone 10, 20 years ago when I was first learning all these techniques, first learning statistics, I should say, an applied
Yep.
work product. Um, the first thing I tell my students is that I don't care what kind of model you're doing. I don't care if your model is you just pointing at a screen going anything above 30 is yes, and everything below 29 is no. Um, if that's your simplest model, and then you're doing like a neural network of crazy proportions of black box sophistication, the core modeling methodologies and assumptions that you need to overcome on your data processes are never going away. Every model at every scale of intelligence is only covering up, bypassing a few assumptions. You still need to be aware of all of your assumptions.
Mm.
So here's the statistical term I'm coming to. I keep bringing up is you have to have a hypothesis to test. So what we were talking about 10 minutes ago is having, if you don't know where to start, talk to your colleagues, learn from the industry, see what they're doing. Heck, even hire a market research firm that helps you understand what your competitors are doing and start there. But then once you talk to your head of data, or you talk to your analytic consulting firm saying, hey, do I have enough data to actually do learning, like testing and learning agendas or optimization strategies? It's often a function of how much you put in there. What we're proud of at Market Theory is we use a particular set of statistical tools that really have helped us look at companies even at the smallest scale. Very low runway. You don't need to have a year or, God forbid, 2 years of data. I hear it all
Mm.
the time like, oh, no, you have less than a year of data. We can't get seasonality. Does this business even run on seasonality?
Right.
And that's also a really interesting cop out, because there are a lot of great data streams out there that can help simulate seasonality while you're
Mm.
building up your client to that point. So one way or another, when people try to give you preemptive um, buts and ifs, that's often a red flag to me. It's 2025. We have a lot of sophisticated methodologies to help people get started with learning, but start learning as soon as possible. And there's nothing wrong with doing testing on your own before the statistics come in. If you want
Sure.
to throw in an extra few grand into a geo test, like it's like, okay, wait, I want to I've never done maybe programmatic buys before. Let me
Hmm.
throw in 15 grand into the Miami Fort Lauderdale market and see what happens after that runs out in a month and a half. If you can afford it and you can budget accordingly for that, do it. And then if you're not sure how to read it properly, bring someone in to help you do a read on that.
I see.
But so number one, don't be afraid to test and learn on your own, and then you can have statistical rigor come and back test. But that's how I would answer your question. The best way to actually get started with optimization and scaling is you got to learn what you did. More sophisticated methods can help you look under the hood um, more quickly than not. And then that can help put into place an agenda that you're comfortable with.
Got it.
Let the test and learn agenda be guided by actual budget constraints, not this
Mm.
idea that like, nah, if you can't afford to do a Super Bowl spot, you're not going to grow this business. Maybe that's a little hyperbolic, but I think you get the idea. It shouldn't have to be go big or go home. Not in this day and age. There are
I
so many
see.
people doing well with microdosing and learning. So if that's all you can afford, you can start there and then learn after the fact.
So we're gonna start with where industry is generally, and then our job next is to make an assumption or a hypothesis about what maybe channel and how much we think would work. And I
Mhm.
think what you're saying is to document our assumption and to revisit the assumption when the test is over.
Nailed it.
Yeah. And what are you looking for to know if a test either succeeded or failed? Let's say let's say it is the programmatic bias in Fort Lauderdale. You spent 15 grand.
Mhm.
What are you looking for in terms of signal? Because there's probably primary and secondary indicators of success in
Yeah.
this. Primary being profit margin or contribution margin.
Mhm.
Secondary could be, margin is coming because we see some sort of other signal. How do you look at it?
In both cases, it's lift. It's did the overall test actually cause a macro lift? So how about this? Instead of calling it macro lift, that's something I do in house. Let's call it
Okay.
the FP&A lift. That's your accounting department. Did they see? If you did not tell them that I mean, you should communicate. But let's just pretend for the thought experiment, your marketing department or whoever is the intermediary betwixt your marketing department and your accounting department, they had no idea there was going to be some heavy up with residual dollars going into Fort Lauderdale,
Right.
Miami, and all of a sudden, but they say, "Hey, we got 12% more sales in September than we anticipated as an accounting department."
Mm-hmm.
Did we do something? Like, so if there's
I
like a
see.
noticeable, let's just call it the FP&A lift. That department could theoretically notice something organically, and then they are going to want to mention it as a footnote of their reporting cadence. That's what I call macro lift. Did the
Okay.
business see something tangible that, could theoretically just be put into um, your uh, your regular gap reporting, whether or not you're a public or a private company, could your reporting notice it? Next is what you would see on for the marketing and sales department side of things, which I would call incremental lift. Now, typically, a traditional attribution model gives you a return on ad spend by channel or tactic. So tactic,
Yep.
of course, going one layer deeper into the channel. Um, Tech, you of course can even go even deeper. You can have like micro segments of like of audience and stuff like that. But
Mm-hmm.
the idea is at any given level, the channel or tactic or whatever the strategy has a read. That is the bare minimum at market theory, and that's actually where the market theory comes from, is that it's not just that every channel has its own return on that spend or action. It's actually how did it also incrementally affect the rest of the mix. That's the market theory. The market theory is that every touch point has a rippling effect on your mix, good or bad. And that is legible. And that is how we've built our statistical procedures.
Cool.
Um, so, what we do, the kind of statistics that we do, is actually um, more of a burden on us. And for the longest time, you couldn't really get a read on it. It was more black box. But it became our mission statement to crack it open and show clients, like, hey, when you actually did do the following test in Miami, Fort Lauderdale in that programmatic buy set, it actually changed the distribution of effectiveness, the actual return on spend at different levels of Google spend or different levels of Facebook and Instagram spend. It changed the distribution of efficiencies and effectiveness of those other channels in the
Mm-hmm.
following way. So that is what I would, so both cases of each channel gets its own effectiveness, but also how it bolstered or hindered other channels is incrementality as well. So there's two different levels of incrementality, but I would call that micro, kind of like micro lift.
So the first one is again, just did
Hmm.
your reports notice? Like, was there more revenue, more margin, and
Yeah.
inexplicable maybe to those folks that would notice that. And the second is still an identifiable lift in either efficiency or sales at the channel level and at the mix level.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna make an extrapolation from that, which you didn't say, but that is that you don't believe. So this is maybe worded too strongly, but you'll correct me. You don't believe that there are secondary measures of success that aren't related to true efficiency? Because one of the things that, and I asked that question because one of the things that I always looked at with people is let's say you do a test in a market. We were working, well, one of the clients was LA. We're actually going to have people on the ground in LA doing handouts and things and
Hmm.
events. And what I said was primary success is margin sales, right? Units sold. But there could be another measure of success, such as search volume or things like that. And those may correlate or should correlate with sales in the future, though we can't attribute them today. Do you believe that that makes sense when you're thinking about trying new things, or do you think it must have an effect on or a lift on sales or on efficiency at a channel level to be a true success?
No, that's a great add-on. And uh, I think where my brain was going was looking for the least common denominator across
Sure,
all my clients.
of
No,
course.
but you brought in a great add-on. We know, and we absolutely, in terms of our reporting, uh, but because our reporting is so customized to our client, we don't have
Got
one
it.
template that
I
we
see.
just kind of go, okay, we have your data, your pipelines are similar to these other clients, you're going to get this dashboard. No, at the end of the day, we talk to our
I
clients and
see.
say, what analytic burnout did you have? Like when the last report you saw, what did you not even care about? What did you glance over? What did you roll your eyes at? Let's try to keep for your view as succinct as possible. So no, absolutely. There are, as you would say, as you framed it, secondary, heck, depending on some sophisticated clients, tertiary metrics that different
Mm,
departments and different eyeballs might care about, in addition to the, let's just call it the bottom line handful of stuff. So, no, absolutely, those are always there. And the mix of those KPIs, key performance indicators, is always some cocktail that's unique to the client's lived and worked experience.
that makes sense. Yeah, and I like those because you don't want to throw out a test that may work in the future. It was just the hard thing that we had with this one client. We were trying to crack
Mhm.
how to launch in cities one at a time. And so we were spending up to 100 grand on a per city basis. And I
Wow.
didn't want the team to just chop a city if we just didn't increase sales in the first 90 days. So yeah,
Mhm.
so that's kind of where that came from.
No,
Um,
that's a great, and that's a great point for people to pick up that if you don't feel like your business is on the right side of that maturity curve to always psychoanalyze to the bottom line, your analytic partner should always understand your
mhm,
place in the business. And yes, especially for like startups and smaller businesses are trying to build brand equity that they've never had before. I mean, I had a client one time. Now we're going back to this is a mid 2022. I had a client who was very early on in the maturity cycle, and they were actually screw that. They were pre revenue. They
okay.
needed to build a base to
Yeah.
actually get the
Yeah.
investors that they were looking for. So we
Yeah.
optimized to a Google Trends
No
uh,
way.
yeah, we optimize to Google Trends uh, on certain specific keywords that spoke to the nature of their product and of course to the brand of theirs that had like a zero line in Google Trends. And so that actually prompted our team for the first time to actually come up with a daily web scrape of Google Trends using
Mm,
our programming. Because when we were going to look back in time at some of these search terms, like there would have been search terms that go back to 2004, for example, for some of those products. But if you've ever played with Google Trends, the farther back you look, the scalability of the index goes from day to week,
yep.
averages, and then week to month,
Yep.
and you can't naturally compare all of those segments. So we had to come up with a programming script that
Oh, I
would take
see.
snapshots at the daily and then scale it by the week and month. It was a whole fun exercise just for this one client. And actually now ever since then, we've been using that daily long trend Google indexing for different clients. It's been really interesting.
That's awesome because pre-rev is so hard. If you're about to launch, I mean, most people just have to, brace for wasted money for a long time to figure out what channel's going to kick off.
Yeah.
So there's another question that's related, which is
Hit me.
to this: how do I measure incrementality without running those expensive holdout tests that can kill our momentum?
Sure thing.
Because there are people that think you can just know what's going to work, and there are people that think you just have to turn things on and off, fiddle with the
Mhm.
dials, so to speak. What's your approach on
Sure.
that? Yeah.
So And you know, this really speaks to why I do the type of modeling that I do, which is, and that another part of the market theory is you do not need to bankrupt yourself, or you do not need to turn off big part of your business to get that incrementality. So the market
Yeah.
theory is all about the interactivity and just letting, just observe the dog, let the sleeping dog lie. Like, don't just scare the dog awake, if you will. You can just,
Hmm.
call your dog's name from another room and see if their ears perk up. I'm a professor. I come up with all kinds of stupid metaphors for
You
like,
have to. Yeah.
I can't help it. But no, but anyway, no, the way, there are a lot, if it's not even just us, but there's lots of amazingly rich machine learning paradigms, statistical techniques out there that allow you to look at incrementality by channel, by tactic, even if you've had a whole world where everything was just on. Like, we had a client, like most of our clients actually start out incrementally, and that just makes it so easy. Like, they started out with some clients that started out by word of mouth, so there was no marketing other than Joe went to the New York monthly get together at different rooftop bars handing
Right.
out business cards,
Right.
and for the first half a year Joe was getting us clients.
Yeah.
That's awesome. We can actually say, like, oh, every time Joe went out, that's a data point. Did Joe keep going out over time? Yeah, Joe kept going out. So we added Joe to some of our MMMs. I kid you not. We have, not Joe specific, you get the idea.
Sure.
So, like, the sales team doing stuff that's non intrinsically monetary, you
Mm.
know, one time we looked at like how much did you spend on plane travel to different conferences? That was a data point that turned out to be very effective. But the point is, that this one company, Joe's going out there, then they turned on Google search. Then they turned on social media. I think they started out with the Meta space. Back then, it was before it was called Meta. So it was like Facebook and Instagram and stuff
Yep.
like that. Then they turned on Google Display. So most companies operate like that. They're turning on channels and being able to statistically get the reading is incredibly easy. Like, it's just when things are going on, you already have a world of off. You don't need to turn stuff off. If you're turning stuff off, it has to be so targeted and deliberate because you could be upsetting the balance that you don't yet see. And if
Mm.
you and a big part of what we do is help businesses see what has been less efficient and effective over time. And then even what we say is, we're not, we'll tell them, we're not telling you turn this off because it became less efficient. We're saying maybe the platform nuances changed. You need a better Instagram partner who understands what's going on with the algorithm or the focus of Meta right now in time. So that's number one. And then there are companies that, have nothing, and then they'll bring in a marketing firm that gives them a strategy, and then everything goes live on a certain date. So then there's only a world where there was nothing and everything. But fortunately, there has never been a business that has a budget of, like, let's just keep it simple, of like $50,000 per month going into 5 different channels, that's only always spending precisely perfectly $10,000 per channel.
Right.
That's not how these things work.
Yeah.
There are volume constraints, so maybe you couldn't even spend all the budget you put into it. So you have rollover budget. Sometimes you ended up because of how you put your business credit card in there, or your agreement with that partner, you can actually keep going over the budget. Like, you had a budget, but then you went over budget.
Hmm. Hmm.
So naturally, peaks and troughs organically come throughout the process of just being in marketing and advertising and sales. So just by virtue of that organic interaction with the marketplace, we can statistically read what's effective at spending levels, without just saying, nah, turn it off and let's see what the heck happens. That's like literally like saying, let's just only have a car without the reverse. Yeah, I could stop that car without reverse. It's just going to make my life really hard. And I didn't have to do that. I can just, you know, I'll just not have reverse and just, just have brakes and drive. I can make it work. It'll just suck.
Got it. Got it. So right. So you're sort of you can look and see at the fluctuation within channels. And I guess, I mean, obviously you have some secret sauce in how you view these things, but you can sort of tell where incrementality could come from looking at how they fluctuate today. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Is there any way
And
for people to do that without talking to you first? Not that they should come and talk to you, but
well,
what would be a
yeah. Yeah. The alternate. Frankly speaking, like you don't always have to go with like some analytics shop that does the fancy thing. Like we do the fancy thing to save time,
of course,
but
of
we
course.
absolutely like. And there's also like that age old thing. Like I've worked with some of these companies, and then I had to be the one awkwardly saying, "Oh no, 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 I'm here now with my team, and my team. We don't need 3 to 4 months to build out this model. Like we can do this in a month, and that includes the onboarding of conversing with you. Like I've been an employee in those instances where I'm like, oh no, no, if your last partner needed 6 months to do a marketing mix model, we can get this done in a month. But if you permit us, give us the extra 2 weeks to at least put the report together because you want the nice PowerPoint too. So then
Mm-hmm.
we'll align calendars.
Mm-hmm.
But no, we do this. So we're so good at scripting how to get this done efficiently. But to do what we do without our bread and butter, it just takes more manpower and a really good eye.
Mm.
But if someone has been in the business for a long time and they're the ones, buying, doing all the buys, and they're looking at all the dashboards, and they really have a feel of like, no, no, no. If I know that an extra $500 is literally all we need on Fridays to get the to own the after work market going into the weekend. We
Mm.
absolutely have clients like that. And sometimes I'll even say like, hey, we had a great onboarding conversation with, let's just say Joe again. And yes, Mr. CFO or CMO or whoever brought us in, you had us come and do a dig. Joe's doing great. A lot of what he said, actually, we're just validating Joe.
Mm.
I don't think you need us until you get to a point where someone else is doing more than what Joe can do. Your business is good enough with that insight. So thanks for your business now. Keep us in mind when you guys decide to scale. Here are some suggestions on how you could. And if you decide to go that route, here are some partners we'd like to work with, or here's the type of partners you can seek out for yourself. But no, in a few instances, we're like, no, you actually have a pretty well oiled machine. And only when you feel like you need to go beyond your current staffing or talent into areas unknown, that's when you might want to bring us in to see if we need to grade someone's homework that you're not familiar with. And so that happens. To be fair, a really good eye of an industry expert in house can do a lot of good without really wasting money on an analytic firm. But granted, I don't think we waste money, but we'll always be honest. And then they often come back to us when they want to scale.
That's the way, 100%. Okay, I have one more question. Maybe we can do 2 minutes for this one because we're coming to the end of our time together. But I didn't want to miss it. And so, how do I prepare my business analytics infrastructure for due diligence if I'm planning an exit in like the next 18 to 24 months? And your experience with
Mhm.
economic litigation and what we talked about at the very beginning, again, I really wanted to hit this one real quick if we can.
Absolutely. Data governance.
Okay.
That's the name of the game. What investors, not even the most sophisticated investors, but especially sophisticated investors, what they're looking for is, are you playing by the rules? The Cambridge Analytica era did one heck of a doozy on the
Yeah.
nature of free. I know that was marketing data in many ways, but it did a number on the data space. And that paved the way for very necessary reforms, I would argue, in GDPR. Now, many people can say GDPR can be really taxing. I get that. You got to start somewhere, and then naturally the business community with regulators will come together and make things where it needs to be, and it will take longer maybe in Europe than it does in America. America has a set of its own little micro GDPRs, like the CCPA over in California, for example, which
Hmm.
is kind of like the the model that many other states use. But
Hmm.
these things matter because they exist. So you can't just bypass them thinking, oh, hey, I'm going to be like Uber and ignore the taxis and the medallion laws. Well, that happened. They kind of got lucky, and I was living in Austin at the time. I remember when Lyft and Uber got kicked out for like 2 to 3 years before the law had to kind
Right.
of adapt to that. I remember that. So the thing is, you can't just expect to come in with an amazing way to collect data or an amazing way to harness data if it intrinsically goes against what
Mm.
would otherwise be best practice or legal. So data governance, making sure you have a good grip on your pipelines. Like, if you're reliant on certain data streams, those can't break then. And investors are going to have tech people in house who are going to ask the right questions about how do you maintain pipeline sophistication across your process. Sorry, pipelining across your infrastructure, your data infrastructure, and your cloud-based infrastructure. So,
Hmm.
governance, adhering to the laws and best practices of the industries, and making sure your pipelines just, frankly speaking, don't break. And if there ever could be a break, how do you recoup what could be lost? Like, are there ways to store the extra data, or can you have a partnership with the company to kind of backtrack some data? Like maybe, like I know Google has, like even if your Google analytic interface can go dark for a bit, it's not necessarily going dark back there. So you might be able to work with them to kind of get a data backfill, for example. Those types of procedures exist for many companies. So just having good analytics is not enough, and having a good product is not enough. You got to make sure if you're looking for a sale, they're going to ask about compliance. They're going to ask about governance.
Got you. Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much. We are at the end of our time together, but please tell us, how do we find you? What are you working on? Who do you like working with?
So, uh, yeah, so if you want to find us, you can find us at markettheory.ai. That's our business website. A lot of people have been finding me also through kind of this new content hub on trying to make analytics and economics more accessible to policymakers, business leaders, the like. And that's Honest Economist or thehonesteconomist.com. But that was the first one's markettheory.ai is our website. And what we're working on now is we ourselves are branching into new industry verticals, trying to take what we've learned in marketing sciences and analytics and transcribe it to other forms of supply chain management with some new clients and interesting opportunities. So, and that's what's got me working abroad right now, hiring some really interesting talent and training them firsthand. Um, and what was the last thing you said? Did I
Who do you like
answer it
to work
all?
with? Who do you like to
Oh, who
work
do I
with?
like to work with? Oh, frankly speaking, I like to work with whoever's in house. I mean, yeah, I have great recommendations. People I've been working for years on brand marketing, on different types of marketing. I have partners all across the board. I have really good financial and accounting administrative firms that I work with specifically. So I have a Rolodex of great recommendations, but I like to first understand who helps just keep the lights on and who is passionate in the office. That's where we start. We don't. We only complement. We never supplement.
Okay. Amazing. Well, Kent, this was awesome. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you a lot, Matt.
All right. Hang on one sec.